Hey everybody, and welcome to my edit suite. We have guests using my downstairs basement studio right now. And by the way, this is my new camera. This is a Razer Kaio Pro. Um, I think it's as good as a compact DLSR. Look at the out of focus bokeh. But today, let's talk about my ideas that need clarifying why I personally think the MH370 video might be real, and also my special interest and justification on the Calvine UFO photograph. So on the MH370 video and the Calvine, both might be fake, right? They could be hoaxes. Calvine might be a rock in a lake or an Airfix model hanging on a string. And MH370, it's so far-fetched. What is it that we're seeing? But I have worked closely with Ashton Forbes on MH370 as a broadcast TV filmmaker who has commissioned graphics over the years. And although I'm old and out of touch, a lot of you have said, I think there's an awful lot of clues in the video which make it very unlikely that it is actually a hoax. Let me actually go through them now so you understand my position and why I am actually aligning myself with Ashton's ideas and that makes the MH370 video really interesting. What are we seeing? All right. Before we do that, I have to make a big statement. Here's the big statement. Both Ashton and David Clark, Ashton Forbes in the MH370 and David Clark with the Calvine picture, are much more interested in how it was gathered, who was behind the thing, and in David Clark's case with Calvine, who the photographers were and where are they now. David Clark has said to me he's not that interested in what the object is on the screen. And Ashton, although Ashton is interested in the Orbs, obviously, right now, Ashton is very, very focused on the Sierra Nevada Corporation and the whole project of Gorgon Stare that was maybe used to capture the MH370 video and might have been involved in the disappearance or the downing of the aircraft. I strongly disagree. For me, both the Calvine and MH370 are about the gorilla in the room. That is, what is it that we're seeing? Calvine, what's that craft? Who made it? What's it used for? Less interested in where the photographers are today. I mean, that's interesting, but I am actually interested in the craft. And in MH370, if it is real, what are we seeing? What are the, as Ashton are now called, the Harry Potter orbs? He obviously got a lot of harassment from people calling it that. But the orbs and the disappearance of the plane, if it's at all possible, what's the physics behind it? And there is physics behind it. And in the Calvine case, there's definitely a possibility of a craft that would look exactly like that. So that's my interest. And why is that my interest? Well, because according to the British MOD, and I think this is pretty good statistical evidence, and this will upset a lot of you, but I actually align myself with what they say. Let me tell you. 80% of all UFO sightings are just misidentified everyday objects. 80%, that's an awful lot. Birds, planes, balloons, swamp gas, whatever you want to call it. They're just things that people have seen that they don't fully understand, especially things that they've photographed because of the way that cameras work and people don't understand JPEG compression and things like that. I mean, honestly, the single point light source drives me bonkers. Jet Valet, the great Jet Valet, said highly strange things need to be highly strange. They don't need to be a bird. They don't need to be a flashing red and green light at flight levels. They're going to be, whoa, they're going to be really strange things. So if you see something which is a single point light source, it might be a drone, it might be an airplane. It probably is. But if you see something that is really weird, a strange anomaly in the sky, or you come across a strange, weird thing while driving through the woods. That's a real event. And UAP are real. I mean, how many times do I have to say that? I'm completely into the idea that UAP are globally present in our planet, in our atmosphere. There's something out there that we don't understand. They seem to have been here for millennia. They are definitely intelligent. They're non-human intelligence. They might be a force of nature. They might be aliens, and they might be time-traveling humans, or even a lot of people are saying that they're AI devices coming back from the future. All possible. We don't really know what they are. And one of the problems is that there's not enough research. Science isn't looking at it seriously because it's a woo-woo subject and it's difficult to get funding. Plus, the other thing is they're very transient. Where do you set up your sensors, multi-sensors, professional sensors that you can correlate and calibrate, to actually record a UAP? I think there are hotspots in the world like Suffolk. Yeah, maybe Skinwalker Ranch, and loads of places all over the planet where people see phenomenon which might be well called UAP. So we need to study that a lot more. You really need to look at the work of Paul Devereaux and Earthlights. I think that's very, very interesting. The global reference to UAP, he's done that work. Check out his books. Good chap. But let's look at MH370 and why I am kind of thinking the video, which might be fake, probably isn't. So I wrote a thing on X or Twitter that a lot of people have responded to, and here's my ideas. And I said, let's look at the facts that this is a fake video. Let's just put that on. Let's pretend it's fake. All right. So the person who made it just within a few days, less than a couple of weeks after the plane disappeared. Now, that's an enormous clue, because when the plane, the MH370 Malaysian Airlines 777 disappeared, it was just a sad, tragic air crash. We don't know what happened to the plane. Over 200 people disappeared. The families were grieving. There was no kind of woo-woo conspiracy alien theory to make a video that might be produced as a joke go viral. And the person who made the video has never, ever said who they are. They've never monetized it. You would think, now that it's gone very, very viral and people are discussing the Orbs and the plane and who took it, and if it was a fake video, it would be on one person's channel where they would be actually licensing it to people like YouTube creators like me or Ashton. But no, we don't know who made it. It's completely free. Ashton Forbes has now claimed it as his owner's keepers, he said. Why? And why was it made so quickly? There was no real reason to make it. And it entered a whole, it added a whole level of weirdness to, at the time, it was just a very sad, tragic plane disappearing story. Think about that. And then it appeared first, I think, on Twitter originally, and then people started looking at it and going, what are we seeing here? Especially with the Orbs. All right, so it's unlikely that it was made so quickly as a hoax, because nobody's claimed it. All right, let's address the corridor crew's debunking of the video. And I'm going to put my old, and I agree it's probably quite old-fashioned, and I think what I'm saying is pretty out of date, but let me put my experience as a broadcast filmmaker on this in commissioning graphics, and that's something that I've done a lot over the years, is if it is fake, and the clouds are a stock footage cloud, you would have to purchase that, so a small cost in that, and also the The airplane, right. So the airplane is 3D. It's a 3D model which you can buy of a 777. And that means you can fly it around and you can rotate it. So the video is 3D. It's not 2D video, it's 3D. So you can actually fly around the video and the model is actually changing. If it was 2D, it would just be flat, right? So suddenly you have to buy a 3D model of a 777. But they didn't. They bought a 777 3D model and then they modified it to be exactly spot on, exactly in the livery of MH370 and Malaysian Airlines. That's quite a skill thing to do. It's possible. I don't think there's an MH370 777 Malaysian 3D model out there. There might be. Correct me if I'm wrong. And then let's talk about the orbs and the explosion. So Corridor Crew said that the explosion matches a stock footage explosion. They're right. It does. I actually was involved and commissioned to film real chemical explosions in a large dark hangar with a high-speed camera for a stock footage library. One of my jobs many years ago. And what was interesting is that they're all pretty well the same. We did poofs, and this chemical explosion propagates. It's dark in the middle. There's photons as a circle expands, and there's spiky bits. And we filmed them all different angles, different sizes, different frame rates. And that even might be the one they used. I don't know. It was done for the BBC for their stock footage library. And it was a fun thing to do with a crew and an explosive expert. And I was the assistant producer just overseeing it. But it was staggering how much the crew said to me, they all look the same, Simon. You might as well just film one. They're just poof. But that means that the MH370 explosion is actually a real explosion. It's not a hand-drawn spiky thing that somebody's animated like a cartoon. It is actually footage of a real explosion. Now, if it is a real explosion, then it is a real explosion. There's no difference if the plane went poof, really, or it was a graphic that you've added on afterwards. It is real, and I don't think there's that much difference between it being genuine and a stock footage one. I don't think that the Corridor Crew they matched up the spiky bits nearly. Well, what I discovered is that all the spiky bits from all real explosions are very similar. So what I'm saying is that it could be real. And then the orbs. What are they? And if it was again, and what I'm assessing, is it a fake video? How would you make it? All right, so you are going to make a jokey fake video and put these Harry Potter 3 orbs on top of the plane and then an explosion at the end. That's what we see in the video. So you're going to do it by animating in a 3D graphics package, and it's just a joke. So you're going to put the orbs probably on a surface layer, and the orbs are going to go woo, 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 and then the plane's going to be flying, right? What you probably won't do, because it's a lot more expense and a lot more time, is make the orbs be in 3D and actually go behind the aircraft as the aircraft's flying. But they do. So whoever did it, one had the mastery of masking and putting the orbs behind the airplane. Why bother? Because it's just a joke, but it isn't. And then the second thing that I found for Ashton over a year ago now is one of the 3 orbs, actually goes through the smoke or contrail that's coming out of the 777, and it passes through the smoke. And when the solid object or the plasma effect of the orb or the fake orb, whatever it is, goes through the smoke, it does Newtonian physics, and the smoke dissipates and recombines and swirls as the object goes through the smoke, just as a real object passing through a contrail of smoke would do. Again, why effing bother? If this is a hoax video that you've produced a couple of days, a week after the crash, why are you going to all this expense? Buying assets, modifying the model of the plane to be Malaysian, animating the orbs in 3 dimensions, adding a genuine real explosion, or it might be a real explosion at the end, and actually having proper physics in it. Now, People have said, I'm very out of touch, and this is all you can do this on your phone. Well, it's not entirely true. Whoever did it, if it's fake, knew what they were doing, and it's possible that it might have been some kind of graphics, a facility who did it as a fake video. I think it's unlikely that somebody would invest the asset of the 3D plane, drawing the orbs and animating them, and then putting real physics as it passed through the smoke trail from the plane, and then buying a cloud background and the explosion at the end and comping it on out of their own pocket, without then monetizing the video and saying that they made it, because nobody has ever claimed that they made it. So I think it points to it's more likely a highly specialized graphic design facility who did it very quickly using a lot of assets. And that raises a big question. Why did they do it? And why haven't they claimed responsibility or monetized it? Because it would earn them a lot of money now. Or does it point towards it might just be real? Ashton keeps finding stuff. Like today I woke up, and one of the things in the video, you can see these 6 heat zones on the top of the plane, and they correspond very much to the air handling system on the 777, where you have zones in the cabin, and you can see the exact position and number of zones on the forward-looking infrared camera. Oh, and that's the other thing. Then a second video appeared. You got the black and white one, and then you've got this colorized forward-looking infrared one, and the planes in the two videos exactly match. Again, just a detail that would be hard to do if you were just drawing it from scratch. It wouldn't be noggin the nog video, which I would do. It's somebody who has a skill in doing a 3D rendered matched video. And then it gets better. So both the videos that were released appear in either 5 or 6 frames per second. The plane isn't going zoop, it's going tuk, 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 as a slow frame rate, which is exactly the frame rate of the Gorgon Stare observation system of the time. It's probably now up to 30 frames or even higher frame rate. But at the time, we think that it was 5 or 6 frames per second, which is fine for a CCTV type of wide area observation system. And that's what we see in the video. But it isn't. It isn't. The video is actually at 30, I think, frames per second, because it's actually a screen recording. So why would a kid in their bedroom or a graphics facility or a graphic designer throw away all their skill and money that they've paid for buying these lovely 3D assets and make it 6 frames per second, which ironically matches Gorgon Stare's frame rate, and then do a screen recording of it, which is at 30 frames per second. So the background is at 30 and the cursor movement, which you can see, and the screen isn't actually a 69 or 4:3 screen. It's somebody has chosen a box carefully and they've resized it during the video. It's obvious to mask edge data, probably sensor data, which is on the wider screen. I mean, that's what it's kind of implying. And the cursor itself is a very typical kind of cursor that's been matched to publicly available Gorgon Stare type video that we've seen that Gorgon Stare actually does. Cursors are all different. I'm sure you've got a different cursor to me. Well, that one is the one that the U.S. Air Force and the National Reconnaissance Office or whoever assets Sierra Nevada Corporation Gorgon Stare AI interrogated wide area Gorgon Stare. Sorry, I'm being a bit nerdy here. That would be the right cursor. So you've just got a whole bunch of stuff in that video which keeps on giving. It keeps on making it more unlikely that it was a kid in a bedroom or a graphics facility. And why would they do it at the time? It was just a sad plane crash. I mean, today, if you wanted to do a flying saucer coming down and picking up the plane and flying it off, woo-hoo-hoo, a bit of a joke. But at the time, it was really sad. And, it was months before any of that conspiracy came out. It doesn't make any sense to me. All right, so let's ignore all that. That's my rationale why I think it might be real, and address the real subject. What are the effing orbs? I mean, that's what we really want to know, and what happened to the plane. Well, I have been researching the physics behind what might have happened. Of course, it might be fake out there. The whole thing could still be just fake. But if it is real, what are we seeing? And is there any technology out there that can produce an orb and fly them around? I think there is. Let me tell you. So the story starts way back in the 1930s with Nikola Tesla, of course, and his death ray. And he came up with an idea of teleforce, of projecting a stream of plasma from a high voltage source to an object. And it produces a pipe or a stream of plasma like a lightning bolt, and it can hit an object at a distance and project energy remotely. And that's what the death ray was. He supposedly got it to work. Certainly when Nikola Tesla tried to sell it for £1 million to the Chamberlain government of Britain in the 1930s, because Tesla recognized that Britain was an island and might need a teleforce type defense system. But Chamberlain, of course, was the prime minister at the time who wanted to do a deal with Hitler, and turned Tesla down and sent him packing, but organized for British security services to raid his bedroom, probably one of the large London hotels, and photograph Tesla's plans that he was hoping to sell to the Chamberlain government that they didn't pay for. So they stole the plans, and they gave the plans to this young guy from Dundee called Robert Watson Watt, who was interested in lightning and interested in the ionosphere, and knew that he could record lightning strikes on some kind of instruments in the 1930s. He knew that there was an electrical discharge from a distant event. So he was the ideal person. And where did he do the research? Orford Ness, right next to Rendlesham Forest, of course, in Suffolk. And he was given the plans and told to make it work if he could, and demonstrate it by, sadly, killing a sheep at a couple of 100 yards. And Robert said it's a brilliant idea. He understood the physics of the death ray, but I can't make it work. He couldn't make it work because he didn't have the power source. Nikola Tesla was very smart in keeping the one element to himself, which is how you switch it on. Even if people paid for the plans, and Britain stole them, I think, and obviously gave some plans to Robert to reproduce, he never revealed how it would be powered. And Robert went back to Tizard and said, no sheep died, which is good, in my opinion. And the death ray is a concept, but it didn't work. But the concept of a directed energy weapon, a force where you could project this word plasma or ionize the air at a distance, was in the back burner of British military defense. Obviously Robert Watson Watt then went on to build a radio direction finding, which later became radar for Britain. And that was absolutely brilliant. But the concept of the directed energy weapon and the Tesla death ray was always kept. Maybe somebody else could do it. Certainly Tesla went on to sell it to the Soviet Union. So what are the Soviets doing? France looked at it. And then, of course, the world was at war with Germany. And what did they find in the sky over Europe and in some places over the Pacific? Between 1939 and 1945 only, very specific, not a flying saucer, not the flying saucers and the UAPs that we've seen for thousands of years, which are real, but during that small window, there was glowing balls in the sky, which were named Foo Fighters. They're not the same as all UFOs. They're not UAP. They are a specific thing. Just because I might now tell you what Foo Fighters might be doesn't mean that ones that occurred earlier or ones that occurred later and things that you've seen are Foo Fighters. No, Foo Fighters, every UAP sighting has to be assessed separately. I have to say that because a lot of people say to me when I say Foo Fighters were man-made, what about the ones in the 6th century? Well, yeah, no, they're real. I'm just talking about Foo Fighters, right? 1939, 1945 over Europe and a bit of the Pacific. British government went ballistic because they thought that Germany had actually made the Tesla death ray work, and because they knew the effect would be a plasma discharge at a distance, and that's pretty well what air people saw from their planes as Allied bombers flew over Europe. They saw these glowing balls. They were spherical, like an orb. We'll go back to why this is connected to MH370. And they followed the planes. They were under control. They seemed to have intelligence. Well, they were. They were probably a side effect of continuous wave German radar, which is very different from British and Allied radar. British and Allied radar uses originally, it used 1 meter wave, and then by that, during the war, it became the magnetron and microwave frequency. But they're all pulses. So you send out a pulse, the single antenna changes to a receiver, and you listen to anything reflected on a single antenna, and you move the antenna radar. But Germany did something different. They had always 2 antennas, one sending out a continuous searchlight beam and one continually listening. And those searchlight beams, they kept turning up the power to 11 to the point where the searchlights, multiple searchlights, converged at a point, and that is enough energy to ionize the atmosphere, especially the exhaust plume of Allied bombers, the unburnt or the exhaust from burning petrol in 4-cylinder engines, 4-engine airplanes, bombers, made a small luminous ball of plasma. That was proven, that was investigated. They really wet the bed thinking that Germany had a new terror weapon, and they wanted to know what Foo Fighters really were because they knew it related to Nikola Tesla and the directed energy weapon. So after World War II, the Allies, the spoils of war for Britain was very much taking the German continuous wave CW radar back to their headquarters of radio lab at Bawdsey Manor, right next to Rendlesham Forest, and right next to Orford Ness, where Robert Watson Watt had perfected radio direction finding. And they experimented with the German continuous wave radar, which was good because it's continuous, so it's very good for tracking a missile from space to near. And that's what the British Bloodhound missile has as coastline defense used, the type 67, 87, I don't know. It was a continuous wave radar, but it had a side effect. If you turned it up too much, the focus beam would make a small ionized ball, which was luminous. And you could move it around the sky, just as the nasty Germans during World War II had seen, but probably didn't know about. And that was seen as a side effect. And over Bawdsey, over Suffolk, over Orford Ness, over Rendlesham Forest, these balls of plasma were often seen and flown around. This week, I'm going to have an interview with Laurie, who was a witness of a ball of plasma over Woodbridge Airport, and she saw specifically a ball split up into 3 orbs. Isn't that amazing? This is back in 1980. Orbs and plasma, folks, are real. So the orbs in MH370 do actually have a history of being potentially correct in physics. and they've been seen in Suffolk. So it relates to Rendlesham Forest, as most things do, if you start understanding what actually happened in Suffolk, England, with Bawdsey, Orford-Ness, and Martlesham. They were definitely into directed energy weapons and radio technology, and plasma is a thing. So again, I'm repeating myself. What's plasma? It's ionized normal matter. You and I are made of normal atoms, and the electrons and the protons are locked together and orbit each other, or go around each other in spheres of quantized layers. And if you put enough energy into the electron, it becomes disassociated with the proton. And then the proton and the electron are in a soup of ionization of plasma. And they are desperate to lock back. And so at the center of a ball of plasma, when it's full of energy, it's dark, because they have become super energized and there's no photons. But near the edge, they want to recombine. And that recombination of the electrons back down in a closer orbit and being now locked again with its proton, it needs to shed energy. And the energy it sheds is photons. And that's why a ball of plasma has a luminous outer circle. And it's a ball because it's in our atmosphere. If it was in space, it wouldn't be spherical. The ball is made by the air pressure. And plasma is always black in the center and luminous on the edge. And it's the luminous edge, which is the recombination of the electron back into a low orbit. Think of a plane landing at an airport. It needs to throttle back. It needs to lose energy. And electrons lose energy to recombine by throwing away photons. Bing, 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 bing. And that's what we're seeing in that sphere, why they glow. And they're used as directed energy weapons. If you produce an ionized ball of plasma, it can be a pinprick. But if you put then a lot of energy into it, it goes oof. And that explosion of it expanding can be a shockwave to knock something out of the sky. And also you can draw pictures with it. If you make a dot, and you can move the dot because you can move the radar or the propagation of the plasma. You can then draw like an old TV. You can scan in 3 dimensions an object. So that kind of idea is used in countermeasures. You can make ghost airplanes, and they are used to attract heat-seeking missiles because they have a heat signature, and they look to the human eye and to radar as if they're real planes, but they're not. They're plasma generated, and now that can be done in a pod underneath your plane. So you can be in your cockpit, turn on the pod, and there's bing, 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 3 other planes next to you that people can see with their eyeballs. But they're not real. They're ghost planes. And that's done by making dots of plasma, which can draw an image fast enough to trick a sensor or the human eye to think it's a solid object in 3-dimensional volumetric space. And, they experimented with that a lot in Catalina Island, where the Tic Tac was seen. Originally, I thought the Tic Tac was probably one of those. I don't think it was anymore. I think it was a pseudo-satellite, a human pseudo-satellite, or a flying saucer. Who knows? But there's certainly the countermeasures using plasma is real. So the orbs have a history. The orbs can be projected and moved around. Think Foo Fighters, think modern orbs, think directed energy weapons, think Tesla's death ray, think countermeasures. You can buy this pod from Lockheed Martin. You've got enough money. And that's how the orbs could be flown around MH370. What happened next? I have no effing clue. How the orbs made the plane disappear. Personally, I'm guessing, because we don't know, I think that the orbs were just a targeting, positioning system for a second directed energy weapon, if any of this is true, that then zapped the airplane. I don't think the orbs did it. I think the orbs might have just been a way of measuring where the plane was in 3-dimensional space. It's very secret and it's very complicated, or it might be fake. But the physics behind it has a history. That's what I'm telling you. That's what I'm sharing with you today. The orbs might well be real. And the video, it's very, very unlikely that it's fake. So what are we seeing? And where's the plane? And what happened to the parts that were washed up? I mean, possibly the plane was zapped by a directed energy weapon and just exploded, and then most of it vaporized. But some of the plastic, especially the honeycomb plastic of things like flaperons and seats and things, the plastic that was washed up on Reunion and East Africa, might have survived the initial blast, hit the sea, and then floated over to Africa. So maybe the plane was just blown up. It wasn't teleported to another dimension. I mean, it looks a bit like that, but maybe it's just a genuine explosion. Enough energy was put into the plane to vaporize it. And that's what we're seeing in that bush of the explosion, unless it's fake. I just think it's interesting. And, I'm interested in the gorilla in the room in that case and in Calvine. I mean, Calvine, interesting who the photographers were, but what's the effing object? It's a diamond-shaped craft. Is it alien or is it human? Well, I'm sure you know this, and I'm repeating myself, but I was contacted by somebody who said, I know exactly what it is. It was somebody from BAE Systems in Wharton who said it very much looks like a radar targeting device. You can tell that the diamond configuration is something that we've been working on, and the skin color and shape and texture make it look like a radar absorbent metamaterial, which again, us at BAE Systems produced. But he then said, I've no idea what it is. I can't say. And the other enormous thing about Calvine is that where is a great question. Where is Calvine? Well, it's in the Scottish low-level military test zone. It's an area where the CAA, the British equivalent of the FAA, have restricted flight rules for commercial aircraft and general aviation because things are tested by the military. So, folks, would the alien come and only operate a UFO in a CAA-designated safe flight zone? No. I think they would appear over Trafalgar Square or the White House lawn, wouldn't they? Why would they only appear in a military operational area which is designated for testing? Why would they know and why would they bother? I think that is an enormous clue. And then the other thing is that it very much looks like either a rock in a lake. No, I'm joking. It looks like a weird object, and the plane, the aircraft you can see behind it does look like a Harrier, but the picture was taken on a Saturday. Amazingly, folks, NATO don't fly on test Harriers at the weekend. Loads of people have told me that. I don't know why. I mean, during a war they would, but the normal testing of Harriers, none of them fly at the weekend. And we really searched for whose Harrier is. Well, hang on a minute. This guy from Wharton contacted me and said he thinks he recognizes the shape of the object. And it turns out that BAE have two Harriers, because they built them, at Wharton as test vehicles that fly at the weekend. And it's 30, 40 minutes up the road over the lowlands of Scotland to Calvine. So he thinks it's BAE, and BAE are the only people in Europe with two personal corporate Harriers. Okay. And then let's look at the date. 2 days after Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait. That's really important. The NRO, the National Reconnaissance Office, and the CIA and the world wanted to look down on Kuwait and see what was happening. Where are Saddam Hussein's army and what was happening in the sadly invaded Kuwait? And to do that, they would need to have some kind of observation drone. Drones are great. They have a range of about 1,000, maybe a few more 1,000 miles. So you need to have a base within 1,000 miles of your operation. And then they take off, fly 1,000-mile circle for maybe 2 or 3 days maximum, and then come back. This is back in the 1990s. Was that operation mounted? I don't think it was. And where would the base be? So what's your alternative? Well, you could do a satellite, but the problem with a satellite, as the Earth turns, the satellite's going to only have a short window when it goes over Kuwait, and most of the time it's over Slough, or wherever, So you need something that it can long loiter over Kuwait. And by the time that the Calvine object was seen, we had these aerostat pseudo-satellites run by the Department of Energy and the NRO and the CIA that could be put up at very high altitude, maybe above 80,000 feet, above normal flight, even above the SR-71. And I have to mention here, the SR-71 doesn't hold altitude records. The British Canberra does. But anyway, the drone-y thing, the pseudo-LEO satellite, is a balloon. Oh, I'm sorry to say this. It's a lighter than aircraft. It's big. It's probably faceted. Oh, yeah, like a diamond. It's coated in metamaterial, and it's probably painted gray or white. It's invisible to the eye. It doesn't absorb, but it refracts radar energy, so it's invisible. It's big enough to hold Gorgon's Stare or other assets to look down on Kuwait, and it probably transmits its data up to a satellite, which is then relayed back to NRO headquarters in Virginia or wherever, and then they share it to whoever is interested in it. I suspect. I don't know. They don't tell me these things. I think it probably was made by British Aerospace, or it might have been made in the United States, flown into Machrihanish, tested in Calvine, and then it was transported and deployed to the Kuwait area, where it was popped up, and it hovered over Kuwait for as long as they wanted, really. Where is it now? Well, I think you've got two options. I think the most obvious thing to do is just to blow it up, and then you would have some bits of tinfoil hit the ground, maybe very Roswell-like, or you bring it down, put it back in the truck, and drive it home and use it again. It just depends what your budget is, doesn't it? But I think it would work as a long loitering pseudo-satellite aerostat observation system with multiple assets on it, such as synthetic aperture radar, an optical and EM recording, just to give information back to the Pentagon and the CIA to what's actually happening in Kuwait. That's the gorilla in the room for me for Calvine. And again, it goes back to what I said at the beginning. 80% of UFOs are misidentified, but the remaining 20% are mainly secret military projects. And that 20% is what I'm interested in, because in that 20% is a mixture of secret military projects that we would love to know what they are, and aliens, if there are any, visiting Earth with probes or time-traveling AI from the future, as Jet Sarfati would say. They're going to be in that 20%. I'm truly grateful that somebody called Mick West is willing to spend his time to debunk the 80%, to say it was JetBlue 123. I mean, I wouldn't go there because all it does is upset people, but Mick does that. If I have to nail my colors to the mast right now, right here, right now for you on YouTube, is I'm interested in the 20% that remains. And that 20% is mainly going to be secret military stuff. And I'm brave and foolish enough to talk about it. But amongst that 20% is going to be the genuine UFO, the UAP that we don't know what they are. And UAP are real. Getting fed up with saying that. They're global, and we don't know what they are. We need more information. But when we see pictures like MH370, I immediately dig into the history and look at orbs, look at plasma generation. It might not be the answer, but it is a timeline. It's a possible timeline. It still might be fake, but if it isn't, it's probably from that timeline. And Calvine, the same. It might be a rock in a lake. It might be an Airfix model still hanging on a piece of fishing wire. Who knows? But if it is real, it's probably a pseudo-satellite long-loitering NRO observation drone built by BAE and tested in a military operation area. It all starts making sense. So that's my personal position. You please argue with me. Please also give me new information. And I'm foolish and brave enough to share it on social media. I hope you found that interesting. If you didn't, tell me why in the comments below. If you kind of like what I'm doing, please support me. YouTube right now is devastated, decimated by tariffs, and every single YouTube creator like me and everybody is suffering. We used to get like maybe $10 for 1,000 views. We're now getting one. So we're really hurting. These cost us the same to make. YouTube don't pay for videos. They share advertising revenue, and advertising revenue is down. So if you want to help support me or anybody else, any other creator, if they have a Patreon account, and there's a link in the description to this, bung us $1, one per month, and you even get a discount. If you buy 12, you'll only pay for 10 months. That is more than YouTube pay me, and that would be really help to keep the lights on in my building here in France, and keep me digging, and keep me, buying new cameras for you and having Zoom calls with interesting people. Please help me and others if you can. Patreon account. The truth needs to be out there.